recording now. Okay.
All right. So I just want to start off by saying thank you, Women Who Code Cincinnati, for letting me join you all today to talk about accessibility. I want to thank you as well for the introduction. Thank you for the invitation, Sierra. I really appreciate it. So I had to come up with a little intro slide. I wasn't sure. But my name is Natalie, and as Alex said, I am a web accessibility specialist at Illumino, and we are a company who we do accessibility consulting. So I was telling Emily and Alex earlier what I do day to day. So we have clients and we meet with them, and I like to think of it as we provide like a educational experience. I test websites, but I create reports from automated testing and from manual testing as well using assistive technology. And we present these reports to the clients and work with them. Typically, we work with them through like a remediation phase to kind of, go over the discovery, like of the issues that we have found and how we would go about fixing this. And we also utilize what I'm going to talk about today, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So we use that as well to kind of point them in the right direction. Now, whether or not people pay attention to that, I can't say, but it is a very useful tool. And it is the guideline. I mean, it's pretty much the backbone of my job. And it's very helpful. It can be kind of a daunting document, or I guess set of guidelines to look at. There is a lot to read, but that's what we're gonna go over today. So as Alex stated, I have my Bachelor of Arts in Media Informatics at Northern Kentucky University. And that is actually where I got my introduction to web accessibility through summer research. I was a research assistant for one of my professors. I had things fall through with an internship I was signing up for. So I was very grateful to be contacted by this professor who I'd had class with a couple times. And so worked with her and jumped into WCAG. I was like, oh my gosh. I'm currently pursuing my Master of Science in Assistive Technology Engineering. So that is in progress. I started that this year at California State University Northridge, CSUN, as it's also referred to. They're a school they're very well known for their for being in assistive technology, for their assistive technology programs. They actually hold a conference every year. I found this out through work. And so they've got all kinds of assistive technology, and this expands past, screen readers, screen magnifiers, and so on. You can go all the way to, mobility aids, prosthetics, etc. I'm also a certified professional in accessibility core competencies by the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. So the International Association actually has quite a handful of certificates. And I think that's one of my favorite things about accessibility is that you can really kind of come across anything and ask the following question: is it accessible? How do you make it accessible? So you can really kind of go down that path of thinking, even when it comes to things like on the outside, on sidewalks, when there's curb cuts, different things like elevators are a form of accessibility for buildings. So they also just recently rolled out a certificate program for documents. So PowerPoint and Microsoft Word, PDFs. So that's one I would like to work on in the near future. I am working on studying for a certificate for, ironically enough, it's called Web Accessibility Specialist. And it's a much more technical piece. The one that I have is more general, and it talks about just the general overview of accessibility, why it's important, who it serves. It also goes into like the policies, the American Disabilities Act, Section 508. So it's very interesting stuff. While the certificates do cost, the material is out there to study. And I would say, even if you can't get the certificate, if you're really serious about accessibility, definitely take a look into those. So anyways, not going to make my talk about that, but I'm also volunteer at Cincinnati Children's, something I'm very, very passionate about, even though we're on pause right now because of COVID. And yeah, and as Alex said, I like to listen to music, travel, and I like to work on open source. And pictured here is me with my little doggy Pip. He's a white and tan Shih Tzu Terrier mix. He's my little quarantine dog. So anyways, so getting started. Welcome to my talk. It's called WCAG, a Developer's Best Friend, presented by me, Natalie. So throughout this talk, you'll hear me say WCAG or WCAG, as it is also referred to. I learned it's called WCAG at my job, and I think that's just kind of the funniest pronunciation. I don't know why. So they are both the same if I say one or the other, but WCAG is, so it's an acronym that stands for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And basically today I'm going to go over the kind of the who, what, when, where, why, more or less. Just a little bit mixed up, kind of backwards, but the objective of my presentation is that if you haven't heard of the WCAG, if you've heard of it, maybe it was too overwhelming, too daunting, maybe kind of reintroduce you to it, but to get you familiar with what it is, and kind of help you to navigate as well, so that even if you don't leave, this presentation, and you go and Google WCAG, maybe you come across it later on down the line at your job or for some kind of project you're working on, and then you can become familiar with it. So with that said, I also presented to you a screenshot from, I don't know how many of you like playing video games. I do. One game I started out with when I was younger was Legend of Zelda. So I have kind of this little image here from Legend of Zelda, the version from the Nintendo Entertainment System, the NES. So it's a very 8-bit pixely type of game. But in the beginning there, Link, the main character, comes up to an old man who says, "It's dangerous to go alone, take this." But he gives him a sword, but we're going to think of the sword as WCAG. So if you want an analogy and you want to laugh, I'm the old man, you're Link, and the sword is WCAG. So basically, so I know I've talked a little bit about how the WCAG's kind of daunting, and I don't mean to speak negatively or make it sound scary. I just know, speaking from experience, I've gone into that's kind of how I got my introduction to accessibility, and I had to go look up WCAG, and it was just this huge document. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know where to begin. I don't know what any of this means. I kind of like to think of it, sorry for so many analogies, there's going to be more, but I kind of like to think of it as kind of like a cookbook almost. So, if you're cooking and you want to cook something like, I don't know, like chicken Parmesan, you're obviously not going to go to the dessert section to find that recipe. So if you're coding or you're creating web content and you have no intention of using a video or putting up a video, you're not going to need to go look at the guideline for captions. It's there, it's great to have, especially if down the line you decide you're going to put a video somewhere else. So I like to kind of think of it as you can just kind of like open it up, find what you need, and then read a little more into it that way. So kind of breaks it up a little bit, makes it much more digestible. So as I said, we're going to do the who, what, when, where, why, but it's going to be a little bit backwards. So the why is accessibility, right? Why are we here? Why are we having this talk? As Alex mentioned before, today is Global Accessibility Awareness Day. While I am very happy to be here on this special day, I do think accessibility is something we need to implement 365 days, but so but alas, I'm excited to talk about this. But the why of the web content accessibility guidelines is that it's accessibility, right? It's got it in the name. And it serves as a guide to creating web content that is accessible to everyone. So while this talk is about developers, and while I'm talking to women who code Cincinnati, whether you're a developer or you're a designer or you have no digital experience, chances are you probably do something like social media. So LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat. If you are creating web content in some kind of form, then you can apply these guidelines to that. For example, I don't know if there's how many of you use Twitter, but they have a feature where when you post pictures, you can put alt text on it. And then if you actually go back and take a look at the pictures with alt text, you can find it if you do like Google Chrome and inspect. So yeah, it's a guide to making content accessible for everybody. And in that case, I think, the responsibility is on everybody, even if you're not coding or, creating designs or anything like that. But the WCAG is specific and technical. So that's where some of the overwhelming piece can kind of come in, is there's a lot. But while there's a lot to accessibility, and that's the great thing about it. And it's specific in these next 2 points, which I'm really excited to talk about, is it provides documentation of failures and techniques on how to fix these failures, which includes code snippets, which makes it a developer's best friend. So it's very specific in that way and technical. You can actually go through and you can take a look at these code snippets that make examples like, here's this criteria and here's how this would fail, and then here's how we would fix it. And then lastly, and this is something that I have found especially helpful with my job and working with clients, but it provides demonstration of who benefits from the success criteria. So it's not just like, it's not just something on the web that somebody wrote up and then you have to implement it, or maybe your boss says like, well, why should we do this? It's like, oh well, I don't know. There's reasoning there's reasoning to why this is extremely helpful, and there's reasoning why the success criteria, it tells you which group of people can benefit from this. So it's not just because a group of people said so. So I have a graphic here on the left hand side of the word accessibility, and it's got the second letter and then the second to last letter, so the 12th letter of accessibility. So anything that's after the A and then comes before the Y is grouped together. And all together, this is 11 letters. And this forms what's called a numeronym. I hope I got that right. This is what forms a numeronym. So you get A11Y or A11Y, as you'll sometimes see it referred to as. So if you go on Google and you search like accessibility or A11Y, then you'll usually get one or the other. So yeah, Just realized that thing was chilling in the middle. So this is also, I don't know how many of you have heard of like I-18N or I-18N. That's also for internationalization. So that's for projects that if you have multiple versions of the project, but it's in different languages, that's also a numeronym. So what is the WCAG? So as I said before, it's the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So W stands for web, C stands for content, A stands for accessibility, G stands for guidelines. So this is developed through the W3C process in cooperation with individuals and organizations around the world. Yeah. W3C is also known as the World Wide Web Consortium. So the World Wide Web Consortium is actually, it's a community of people where member organizations. So I know at least in terms of the WCAG, there's like if you see like the group of people who have participated or contributed to the WCAG, you'll see some people from like Microsoft, IBM, you'll see like freelance contributors. There's also people from like smaller tech companies, people from universities. So people come together and create these standards for the World Wide Web, one of them being the WCAG. So there's also a full-time staff and the public that works together to create these web standards. And this is led by the inventor of the web, Tim Berners-Lee. And so their mission is to make sure that the web is led to its full potential. But the WCAG explains how to make web content accessible for people with disabilities and assistive technology. And we will, well, actually, I'm going to show you guys kind of how to navigate. So we'll dive a little deeper into that. But I've got a little bit of a breakdown of the WCAG. And again, like I said, we'll get into it. But the breakdown is that, so it's divided into 4 principles, which is also known as POUR, P-O-U-R. So think of like I'm going to pour you a glass of water. So it's another acronym, lots of acronyms, lots of analogies. So essentially what these principles are is that the content that you make for the web, you want it to be P, perceivable. So this is your captions. This is your text alternatives for images, your contrast. I laugh because sometimes I shared at work that I sometimes have memorized the success criteria numbers for the criteria. So I like have it in my head. I don't know what that says about me, but you also want your content to be operable. So one of the things that I think about with this is like keyboard navigation, or you basically want to operate your website or your web page with a keyboard. There are users who cannot use their mouse, or maybe they rely on a mouse stick. So in these cases, you want to have other methods that your website can be operated by. And you also want your content to be understandable. So this is something not to be confused with internationalization, but this is something where language does come into play. If you have different pieces of your page or your website that uses a different language, you want to make sure that it's coded properly. This will also, there's a guideline under here as well for like reading level, reading sequence or reading order. And then you also want your content to be robust. So with this guideline, all of them do have code that apply, but for this one, I kind of think of it as being the more code-centric type of guideline, where parsing comes into play. So making sure that you're following good examples of good HTML. And then you also want to, your
Come back.
Oh, I'm so sorry. That was my internet.
Oh, no problem at all.
Oh my gosh, I even talked about how I was like, I'm so nervous this is gonna happen, and it did.
We understand technical difficulties here,
Gosh.
so no worries.
I tell you what,
I know it can throw you off your game when that kind of stuff happens.
Yeah, I started talking and then I just saw this spinner and I was like, wait a second.
No.
That's why my internet's not the best. So, okay, now I'm off my game. Okay, so we have 13 guidelines and these each contain sets of criteria. And so one of the things is that with these criteria, they also meet conformance levels, which again, I will go over here in a second, but we have 3 conformance levels. The first one being level A, second is level AA, and then the third is level AAA. And then lastly, the WCAG has 2 published versions. So WCAG 2.0 and WCAG 2.1. And then one that is scheduled to publish this year in 2021, which is WCAG 2.2. All my little subtitles went away. There, I think that's, there we go. Yay, sorry. All right, so, and then as I stated before with the conformance levels, so level A is your very basic functionality. So not meeting this level can pose challenges for assistive technology to navigate or operate like the website that's in question. So if you don't pass this, it's, as I said, it poses a challenge to the actual functionality of the website. And one of these things, again, as I mentioned before, is keyboard operability. So if I can't navigate, or if somebody can't navigate through your website with just the tab key on their keyboard, then you don't even meet level A. So level AA means that you would satisfy all level A criteria. This I like to think of, it's generally kind of the baseline. It's the very common conformance level. A lot of websites tend to go for meeting this set of conformance. It's generally required for government and public body websites, I should say. So yeah, so this is kind of the baseline. You want to get to level A. Generally, people want to get to level AA, and then level AAA. It's not unheard of, but it's typically kind of rare and more for specialized websites. It is considered the golden standard for accessibility, and it means that you would satisfy all of level A and then all of level AA. And in here too, the guidelines are a little more stringent. So you have things like with your color contrast, you don't have as much wiggle room with it. It is very strict. So you're like, not that black and white is the only thing that you can use, but you have to use very light colors on very dark colors. So you really have to meet that color contrast pairing. versions of WCAG are considered backwards compatible. So back to kind of the gaming reference, but think of like your gaming consoles that are backwards compatible. PlayStation, except for PS4 for whatever reason. You can play like older games on newer consoles. So in that same case, you have WCAG 2.0, and then you have WCAG 2.1. So WCAG 2.1 is all it is WCAG 2.0, and then additional additional additions, additional updates, and improvements. So, and then WCAG 2.2, when that comes out, will be the same thing. So it's basically everything that's got 2.1 and then more updates onto that. And the reason that I bring that up is because a lot of times people generally think, especially with like audits, they think, well, okay, if we go through and we test and we remediate and we change our website or we follow WCAG 2.1 and then WCAG 2.2 comes out, does that mean that everything we just worked on, goes in the trash? Which is not the case at all. Everything stays the same. There's just extra things added to it. That's what the W3C works on, is they kind of have these conversations about, well, what about this? What about that? What should we add? So things like that. So it doesn't mean that any of the work that you've done with 2.1, is meaningless. The WCAG is a technical standard, not an introduction to accessibility. And I want to just say that if WCAG ends up being your introduction to accessibility, that does not mean you can't learn accessibility. If you, don't know where to start and you somehow find yourself like diving into the WCAG and then you're like, oh my gosh, you can learn accessibility. You might have to backtrack a little bit and get more of the like scratch the surface kind of stuff, but it's a very helpful, very useful tool. As I mentioned before, that's how I got my introduction to accessibility. I did my summer research project in undergrad, and with research you're helping the professor, so she was like, one of the first meetings she was like, yeah, here's something called WCAG, go take a look at it. And I did, and I was like, I don't know what I'm looking at. So yeah, and then I kind of felt like Ralph Wiggum here from The Simpsons, who sits on a bus and he chuckles and says, I'm in danger. Except for a more high-pitched voice, it's like, I'm in danger. But so if you feel like that right now through the presentation, hang in there. It's gonna be okay. We're gonna get through this. So yeah, so who is the WCAG for? If you ask me, much like accessibility, who is accessibility for? It's for everyone. So who's the WCAG for? Everyone. Maybe that's just me being enthusiastic, but so the W3C says that WCAG is primarily intended for web content developers. So that's your page authors, your site designers, developers, your coders, people I'm talking to right now. Web authoring tool developers. So the developers who create things like VS Code, Sublime Text, Notepad, back to the basics. Even think like systems like WordPress, or when you're creating like WordPress plugins, those need to be accessible. Web accessibility evaluation tool developers. So the people that are behind Wave, which I believe that comes from my memory, WebAIM, I believe, owns that one. And then Axe, which is owned by DeQ, which is also an accessibility company. So even those tools need to be accessible. And then others who want or need a standard for web accessibility, including mobile accessibility. Related resources are intended to meet the needs of many different people, including policymakers, managers, researchers, and others. So again, as I said, I think it's for everybody. Again, maybe that's just me. Got a gnat in front of my face. So you might be wondering, where or how do I start? When can we get started on taking a look at this? So before we do get started, I am gonna hop over to Google Chrome here in just a second. That will cut out the captioning, and I apologize, but we'll bring it back. So I have 3 links here, and I am gonna, Sierra and Alex and Emily and Sandy, I'm gonna create a copy of this so that, because I do have some links for like resources, and then if you want to distribute to other people so that they can have this. So the first one, if you are just learning about accessibility, luckily enough, W3C has a link to a page called Accessibility Principles. And what they do is they take the principles that I just talked about, POUR, and they kind of, they more or less explain it, but they strip out the technical stuff. So it's not as much reading, but they do have some useful examples. And then ready to get technical, we'll start there, but that's the quick reference. And then if you're feeling brave, there is the full WCAG, which we won't go into, but I'll give you an idea of what it looks like. So with that said, and I hope my internet just blipped out only that time. So I hope we're good. See, I was trying to get back to the, let's see. Can you all see my Google Chrome?
Yep, we can.
Okay, cool. All right, so as I was saying before, so this is the W3C page, and this is where pretty much everything I listed is coming from. So accessibility principles, quick reference, the full WCAG. You can go to w3.org and they have all kinds of standards from internationalization, privacy. I think there's some on security. I might be wrong. I don't know. So the accessibility principles, this is a good starting point if you are just for the first time ever learning about accessibility. You can go through these different sections. As I said, there's perceivable information. Keep going down. Operable. Functionality is available from a keyboard. Let's see, understandable information. So text is readable and understandable. So you have your languages. You don't want pieces of your text to kind of, scrunch together if I have to zoom into like 200%. And then robust content. One of my coworkers calls parsing future-proofing. So, so then we have, this is what the quick reference looks like, and this is what I'm going to demonstrate here. But before we do get started on that, this is what the full-blown guidelines look like. So it's the quick reference, but it's more about the background, layers of guidance, supporting documents, requirements. It's got a lot of like the change logs, like what's been added. I mean, it's a very hefty. This is what I started looking at when I first was introduced to the WCAG, and I was just like, no, this is a lot of reading. So with that said, I'm going to hopefully alleviate any fear from that. So this is, in my opinion at least, this is a much more digestible version to take a look at. They do have links on that describe to you how to use it, what it's about, the techniques. I'll be honest, I do kind of skip past that. But they have, so they have this nice little feature over here. And this is where, this is where they have the principles. They have your perceivable, then they have your operable and the numbers that go with it. They have understandable. And you can click on these. So if you need bypass blocks, it'll take you to that section. You can read kind of a little snippet about it. You can look at the techniques. Going to the understanding button will actually take you to more in depth about the criteria, which we'll take a look at here in a second. And then another feature here that they have is filter. So this is one of the main things I kind of want to stress about, is that they have this way to just filter through everything that you need. So you can start with, maybe you're just doing developing. Now, I will say, I tried this out earlier and I was like, I don't think this really changed that much. I think there's still pretty much everything on here. So, but yeah, so you can, you can filter through these, whatever you need, whether it's visual design, interaction design, content creation. So I'm gonna actually, I'm gonna put all those back in there. Then they have this nice little thing, these tags. And this is something else I'm a fan of. So if you want to take a look for images, okay? So if you want images, and then I explained earlier how AAA is really not used. It's used, but you generally will go only up to level AA. So you can uncheck that. And then you've got pulls up all the criteria that you need for images. So images of text, non-text content, that's going to be talking about your alt text. So yeah, so everything's grayed out. We can get rid of that. Maybe we want color. So this is your contrast. Use of color is when you have graphs or charts or anything that kind of presents data. You can color code it, but if you color code it, you need to have some kind of text alternative, because if you use something where, say you're using green and red, right? And green signifying something good and red signifying something bad. There are people with red-green color blindness who are not going to be able to see that. And they're not going to be able to determine that. So you want to have some kind of text alternative for that. Focus visible, so that's your focus outlines. So yeah, so there's, as you can see, there's all kinds of tags that you can, there's animation, audio, CAPTCHA, blinking. Please, 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 in 2021, do not have really bright, flashy blinking. You will give somebody a seizure. Yeah, text alternatives, user interface. So this is really nice because you can just kind of tag out what it is that you want to focus on. So we're going to show fewer tags. You can sort by your levels. If you just want to look at the failures, and then if you just want to look at the techniques. So we will go to, I want to show one of the criteria, but just in depth. But to also kind of go back to what I was saying. So here's this is what I was talking about, where things kind of stack. So you have your principle, and then you have your, your guideline, and then here's your success criteria. So it's kind of goes in like a step fashion. All right, so we will take a look at captions. All right, so this is another one of my favorites. So up here, this will tell you a little bit more about the guidelines. So you've got 1.2.2, this is captions. Captions are provided for all pre-recorded audio content and synced media, except when the media is a media alternative for text and is clearly labeled as such. So this is nice because it breaks down the guideline for you. It goes more in depth. So what's the intent of it? And now the intent and the benefits is what I was talking about before about who this applies to and who this benefits. So you see here that says people who are deaf or having a hearing loss can access the auditory information in the synchronized media content through captions. Every single one of the success criteria has this section. It has a section to further explain to you who it is that's going to benefit from this, which is great. And then you have your examples. Now, captioning is not going to have a coding snippet because it's typically something you turn on, as we were talking about before the talk started. And then it's got extra resources like these are outside resources from the WCAG on captioning best practices and online captioning, National Center for Accessible Media, captioning resource list from WebAIM. There's a captioning tool, there's techniques. So, I mean, you can go through these and there's just so many resources. And yes, sometimes it's overwhelming, but it's also nice because it's like you're the one looking for this. You're like, where can I figure out how to get captions to take place? So yeah. So let's see. There you go, back to the PowerPoint here. I hope I'm still okay on time. I think I am, but I figured this would be a good kind of stopping point. The next few slides I have are just wrapping up and additional resources I'll just share with you real quickly. But with that said, anybody have any questions? I have a scene here in this picture. It's from, I love The Office. And Ryan the temp says, do you have any questions, Kelly? Or do you have a question, Kelly? She's like, yeah, I have a lot of questions. Number one, how dare you? So, yeah.
I have a question. So you talked about, or you said that one of the guidelines was that all content should be keyboard accessible or keyboard operable. Does that mean that you should be able to access it by tabbing, or would you be able to access it by using arrows? So for instance, I'm thinking about like input buttons or input like radio buttons. Is it expected to be like tabbable?
So great question. There's so typically with keyboard, a lot of it's going to rely solely on tab, and then the enter and space button will interact with, like, if you've got a link and you want to open up that link, or you want to click the button more or less with the keyboard, that'll be where your enter and space come in. There have been instances where you can use arrows. I do also know, though, that arrows are at least I've seen them much more used with screen reader. The keyboard navigation sometimes differs between keyboard alone and the screen reader, because screen reader, I don't know what you want to call them, developers or manufacturers, they tend to kind of create them where they have their own set of keys that work to do this, this, and this, if that makes sense. So yeah, you can use arrows for that, but typically they're going to rely on the tab key and the enter and space if they're using only keyboard. Great question.
I also have a question.
Yeah.
You know me, I come from the mobile side of things. iOS and Android both have like pretty robust operating system level accessibility frameworks, so that it makes it like incredibly easy to meet most AA guidelines for the most part.
Yeah.
Does the web and those web frameworks have the same level of support?
So I guess, do you mean like with the actual development itself? Does it?
Yeah, development wise, like, is it? I think of iOS and Android just like having like really incredible frameworks to work with, so it just like does it for you.
Mm-hmm. So
I think of the web as like the wild, wild west and has no rules, and so I was just curious if like it has these kind of rules. You
have no rules. No, there are rules. Emily said depends on what framework you're using. Yeah, so that's another thing too. So I will say, as far as things go, like one thing I've noticed, at least with testing and auditing, is a lot of the times I'm looking at HTML and CSS.
Mm-hmm.
So you know how people kind of like to argue what's a programming language, like that's your bread and butter is the HTML and CSS, and a lot of your code is going to go in place of that HTML, but HTML is also used throughout those frameworks too. There is ways to implement accessibility through JavaScript. Now, I will be honest, I'm not as well versed in JavaScript as I'd like to be. I took a course on vanilla JavaScript and I was just like, oh, no. So yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know how to quite answer that question. I do kind of feel like there is a little bit more on the website than there is with mobile. But then at the same time, there are these guidelines for web content, and then they have, I think it's still kind of a working draft, like it's not quite as published as the WCAG, but the mobile accessibility guidelines from the W3C.
Mm-hmm.
So they have like that, but it's such a short document.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say with what Emily said, it depends on the framework that you're using. There's different ways to kind of implement accessibility that way, but I would also say you're gonna usually always 9 times out of 10 go through HTML and CSS. Especially with your colors, you're gonna go through CSS. If you do like your focus outline and things like that.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I get most of my accessibility guidelines from either Google or I think Apple also has like their human interactions guide.
Mm-hmm.
And I think of those as guiding my decisions more than the World Wide Web Consortium.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that it pulls from those same principles.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. I mean, it does apply that way in mobile as well. And I will say too, at least one of the things that I like about mobile now, I'm not mobile developer like you are, so take this with a grain of salt. But I have noticed, so I have an iPhone, and they have VoiceOver for their screen reader, and then Android, I believe, is TalkBack.
Yep.
I've never used TalkBack, but I was using VoiceOver the other day, and so that's the other thing is like keyboard focus is not going to quite apply in mobile because you don't have a tab key. But I do like how VoiceOver kind of highlights where you're at, so throughout what you're pressing. It's still one of those things I need to get better at using, but I know there's like swipe gestures that you can use for different things. But I do like how I don't know why, keyboard focus is a really big thing that I'm just like, if I don't see it on somebody's website, I'm like, God, I don't know where I am. So yeah, I like that a lot about mobile testing. I could just tell where I'm at.
TalkBack also does that. So.
Oh, really? Cool. Yeah, I need to test through that.
Apple just announced that VoiceOver will be reading images as well using AI.
What? Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think I read something about that, and there was something else that they were going to label through AI.
They also free watch. You won't need to use your hands to interact.
They announced a lot of cool stuff yesterday.
Yeah, it was all yesterday.
Yeah, same with Android. There was a bunch of new accessibility stuff, but it was mainly just like transcribing stuff. There's a lot for Apple.
I think the Facebook app actually started implementing that because I was using VoiceOver the other day, and I was just kind of like getting familiar with the gestures and stuff. And so I pulled up my Facebook and was scrolling through my news feed, and it started reading me memes, like the actual content of the memes. And I was like, what?
What the? I didn't even know that was possible. So I think that was Facebook specific, but I'm not sure.
Wow. Yeah, PowerPoint, while I was working through this, I had put images in and I didn't know that they had, I know that you can put alt text in, that's what I did, but I didn't know they had like an AI powered, like you could generate it. Because as soon as I put that first image in of myself and Pip, it was like girl holding dog facing camera. I was like, well, you're not wrong.
Yeah, this was like voiceover was like, this image may contain blah 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 blah, and like it read the different like the different words that were in the image.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's really neat. I like that.
When you try to add alt text on Facebook, or when you do add alt text, I think that it will also give you that option, or like be like, here's what we think it should be. Do you want to make any edits to this?
They have that in Facebook? I didn't even know that.
I think so, because I was adding alt text to something.
Okay.
I think it was them, because I know it's not Twitter, and those are the only social media websites I use.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Instagram does, but I didn't know. I've never tried with Facebook. It's pretty cool.
Oh yeah, I forgot Instagram does have the alt feature. I didn't know about Facebook though. I haven't posted anything on Facebook in a while, so so that's when like I know with like LinkedIn sharing like this event, I was like image alt and then trying to like put the text from the left side and then headshot of Natalie Stroud.
Short. I think LinkedIn's is like 40 characters or something. It's ridiculously short.
Yeah, so that is the thing with alt text. You don't want to write a book. I think it's some screen readers will eventually cut off at so many characters as you read. So if you you can put alt text in that exceeds those characters, but whether or not they actually get read is a whole other thing. So I think it's like best practice is you want to do 120 characters, I think. I might have to double check that. But yeah.
I have a related question about images.
Yeah.
So I got to go to a GQ event, and they were talking about making images descriptive. Like, is the image descriptive? And that was the first I feel like I've ever heard of that before. Because I just assumed you always, like, it was just one of the few always rules was that you always add alt text to an image.
Yeah.
And then they were talking about leaving it blank, and I was, breaking out into a cold sweat because I thought that was a big no-no. And so could you maybe talk about like how you know if an image is descriptive, or like how you can like just decide that? Because I guess it's a decision you make when you're reading it.
So that's a really great point. And I actually read something, I forget where it was I read it. It may have been Twitter. Somebody had talked about alt text and the reaching the general consensus as to, so with pictures, they say that if you have a picture that provides context to something on your web page, that you want to have alt text and you want to try to be as descriptive as you can. Some cases you can't, and that's okay. But you want to try and be as descriptive as you can. And then there are some cases where there are images that are what's considered decorative. So when I think of those, that's like your, I'm trying to think of like an example, but maybe there's like a SVG icon kind of thing, and then like some text underneath it. So those are what I would generally declare as decorative, because it may just be kind of like relating to the text below, and the screen reader will pick up on that text. And then if you do decorative, what you'll do is what's called null alt text, NULL. So you'll put alt equals and then 2 quotation marks for your code. And so then that way the screen reader, when it reads it, it'll know to pass over that image, and you won't need to read over anything. If you have an image that does not have the alt attribute, then you generally get some kind of message that's like graphic. I forget what the exact wording is, but I know NVDA, which is a screen reader, will say something like graphic, missing description for image description, please. I forget what the exact context is. It's something basically it's telling you, hey, there's no alt text for this. they don't put alt text. So you'd want to do for like decorative images. That's why you'd want to do no alt text now. Going back to what I was saying about what I was reading on Twitter is there was somebody on there. She stated that she was blind and that she knows sometimes with alt text, accessibility specialists can generally kind of declare like what's decorative, what can be skipped over by the screen reader, but then it's it kind of becomes subjective because it's like, well, what why not just say like, oh, this is an icon, just to let them know what it is that you come across it. So I feel like I kind of went off around your question. I apologize, but yeah, you do want to kind of be as descriptive as you can, but not write a book, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. I tend to have that habit too of like I like writing in general, but I'm always just like scratching my head like, how do I put this in 120 words or 120 characters? So yeah, great question. And WebAIM actually has a good tutorial. I think if you just search like WebAIM alt text or WebAIM alt text tutorial, they do have a page where they kind of go into like how you would want to approach alt text. So definitely check that out.
What is the best practice for something that's going to be over 120 characters? Is it to put, I'm mostly thinking about Twitter. That's where I do the most alt text, is on Twitter. I run several of the Women Who Code accounts, and I always try to be a good citizen and add alt text to all those for background. Yeah. But like your picture, that tile is like the template I use for a lot of events. And when I add out alt text to any of those, they're going to go over 120 characters. There's just like a lot of information. Is it better to not add alt text and add that in a like tweet below it if it's going to get cut off anyways?
Yeah, that's a good question. So especially because I know Twitter also, and I was going to mention this, but I noticed that Twitter has, I think you could put like 250 characters in your alt text, which I was 1,000.
Like, wait. It's
1,000
characters. Yeah, it's big.
I would say probably the best way to go about that is do both. It's not necessarily a failure if you repeat it. Now, sometimes we will mark it up that way because it's just a nuisance to screen reader users, but it's better to have it than not have it, is the thing. So if you come across the photo and then like maybe it cuts off and then you have another tweet underneath that's got like basically just word for word like the alt text but just copied below, then they can still read through that. Gotcha. So it's like you kind of get cut off but keep going. Keep going. Yeah, no, that's a great question. I completely forgot that I thought it was 250 characters for some reason.
It's a lot.
Oh my
I've never gotten close to breaking that.
Now I wonder, and this would be something I'd probably just have to do like some outside research, but I don't know if maybe like just the way the different screen readers work, because I do know sometimes with testing, so they have NVDA as one screen reader. I really like NVDA, except that they don't have it for Mac. So that's the downside, but the upside is it's free. So now JAWS, I'm pretty sure you can do both PC or Mac, but the license is a big chunk of money. So But I know sometimes with screen readers, when you're testing, they can kind of NVDA might not catch something, but JAWS will catch it. So I kind of wonder if there's a difference between screen readers or like VoiceOver. Maybe VoiceOver catches all of that alt text, whereas like NVDA or somebody else does not. Again, that's something I'd have to look up. Yeah, great question. Any other questions? If not, I do have just like, I promise, just like 3 more.
I have a question.
Yeah, no, go for it.
I keep forgetting the secret there. So I do a lot of accessibility with my job, and what are your favorite tools? So I use web apps, and that's all behind, authentication, so it's not public. What are your favorite tools with web applications that aren't just websites? Do you have a lot of like Chrome extension tools or anything like that?
I sure do. Yes. So as I was stating earlier, I don't know if you've ever heard of Wave, WAVE. Yep. I'm 100% sure that's floating. It's been a minute since I've looked at it, but Wave is a good one. You can download that, and then any page that you're on, just click it and you're good to go. There's one I really like that's called, so it's from Khan Academy, KHAN, and it's called, I'm gonna put it in the chat, but it's called Totally, but it's spelled with that numeronym I was talking about earlier. So if you look at that in the Chrome store, that one's not as descriptive, but it is really good for like contrast. It kind of puts these little like bars in different areas where the contrast is not meeting what it should. What else? And that one's also good for headings too. And then another one that I like is called Site Improve. They do a really good job of, so what I kind of like with theirs is they'll have the issue, and then they have like, when you pull up more about the issue, they'll put view code in, or what is it? View code snippet in DevTools. So when you open up DevTools and then you click that link, it'll take you straight to the piece of code that is in question or has the issue. So I think that that's really helpful. And they have, when they have the issue, it'll also highlight or like kind of get like a focus ring around it. So yeah, I would definitely recommend checking those out. If I think of any more, I'll definitely let you know. But those are like the ones that come to mind.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
Yeah, there's all kinds of tools out there if you know where to look.
Did you say that you were studying for the web accessibility specialist? How's that going? How far along are you?
I was just gonna say slowly. So very grateful, and I know that some of my coworkers are in the chat, I know, but so it's DeQ has really nice courses for those certifications, whether it's the web accessibility specialist one or if it's for the CPACC one, the one that I have.
Okay.
What I really like about those is, so again, they do cost.
Yeah.
Sorry, I wish everything was free. So I yeah, I've got those courses. They're really great, I think, because in general people learn different methods to have like the text, which is great. They do have a simulator. I apologize, it says my internet connection is unstable, so if I'm lagging, sorry. But so they do have kind of a simulator for like different color blindness. It kind of shows you, So it takes like an image or a piece of a screen, and it's like, this is what it would look like with this color blindness or this one or the grayscale kind. There's videos. The videos are awesome. They have like little quizzes, not like quizzes that you need to pass those courses, but just check-in status quizzes to kind of engage you and make sure you're reading along or following along. So I really, really, really recommend that if you can. Yeah, the WebEx, how's that going? It's slowly and surely. It's also, it's one that I really want to do though, because it's technical. And I think it's good to have for my role. But I think if anybody, like, if you're wanting to get those certificates and you want to know where to start to get like a general idea of accessibility, definitely I would start with the CPACC. You don't have to, you can do either or, but I would definitely recommend that.
Okay.
Yeah, just because it gives you the bigger image. And I also picked it because like I was looking at the body of knowledge and just like the WCAG, I was like, oh my gosh, I was like, I don't know about this one. And then I was reading the study material for the CPACC and I was like, I can do this. So yeah. So definitely check that out.
Cool. And once you get both of those, you get like a higher level of certification, right?
You do. So you get it's grouped together. You don't have to do like a test. So after you pass for the certification for the CPACC and it's still activated, and then you get the Web Accessibility Specialist certification, then you get what's called the CPWA. So nice. Yes, I am very, and what's nice about that is it will also your certifications, I think, are active for 2 or 3 years. I'd have to go back and look, but I want to say 3 years. But if in the middle, like if your CPACC certification is active and then you go and get the Web Accessibility Specialist one, then it basically kind of resets that clock.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah, I was reading about that. I was like, oh, yes.
Cool.
Woo-hoo. Yes.
Well, good luck with that. I hope that goes well for you.
Thank you. Yes, I hope so too. I'm cross my fingers. They do have the one that I was talking about is called the ADS, which is the Accessible Document Specialist. So that one's if you want to learn how to make PDFs and Microsoft Word and PowerPoint accessible. So I definitely want to try that one out too. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. No, thank you. Any more questions? So you can still think of questions. I do just want to, I've got 3 slides left and I promise my little doggy is, it's like, are you done? So I've got some additional resources. And again, as I said, I will distribute this out to Sierra and Emily and Sandy and Alex. So that way you don't have to be like, writing this down and be like, oh, I didn't catch that. Because I do want to share these with you. And I do also want to express there are tons of resources out there. It can be very overwhelming. I think these are the ones that I picked thinking of developers. I just feel like these would be very beneficial. One that I do want to share with you all is something called empathy prompts. So this is really cool. I can't remember where I found this, but there's prompts that come up on your screen. So it says mute your speakers, then try and watch a documentary. This prompt helps you understand what it's like to have an auditory condition like neural hearing loss. So you can actually try it out. I usually just kind of shuffle through these and sit and think about them. And I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah. So then you can come down here and you can shuffle. listen to this video, put on some earbuds and play this video, then try and have a conversation with a coworker. I'm not going to click it. I'm also kind of scared. This prompt helps you understand what it's like to have an auditory condition like tinnitus. So it's really cool. You can continue to shuffle through these and kind of test out these different situations. And then it'll tell you what the prompt helps you to understand. So it's empathy prompt. So it helps you to understand what it's like to have cognitive condition like diminished problem solving skills. And then it has links. So this will take you to the cognitive article for WebAIM. This will take you to the diminished problem solving skills, which is explained in WebAIM. But yeah, so just something I kind of wanted to show you all. And you can keep shot. There's so many of them. I won't go through all of them, but so yeah. So then I have my contact information. I have my website. You can find me on LinkedIn. You just search Natalie Stroud, or I'm in the. You can find me on Women Who Code, tagged in the little event. I'm also on GitHub, Natastro, Natastro, and you can email me at in.stroud@outlook.com. And again, I will send this out to everybody if you want to chat. If you have any more questions, maybe you can't think of it right now, that's totally okay. Yeah, if there aren't any more questions, here's little Pip. This is bye. Look at his little tongue. Yeah, but thank you all for having me. Again, I don't know where I'm at on time. If there is time to answer more questions, I'm all for it. But thank you guys for having me so much.
Thank you so much for being here. This is
Yes, thank you
incredible.
so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. And thanks for bearing with me with I was like, oh, I just know my internet's gonna, yeah. So we made it. So.
I mentioned this in the chat, but if you're not following along with the chat, we do host all of our slides on GitHub. You can find ours at GitHub name Women Who Code Cincy. And we have an events repo of all the past videos and all the slides as PDFs. So you can browse this and many others.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. Oh, that's a good idea. I should make this, I can make this like a README or something and then put the links in that way. That's a good idea. See, because I was like, oh, I'll publish this on my website or, yeah, so.
I love this slide deck with all the memes. Quality.
Oh.
It's quality.
Thank you. I was putting this together and I was trying to think it out. And then I was reacting in different ways. And I was like, memes.
Yes, when in doubt, do the memes.
Yeah. That's a lot of fun to do alt text for too. So I got my practice in on that. Let's see. Hi to Pip.
I love when the puppies visit us.
Yes, he makes plenty of appearances and meetings and